Hi, Lori Morse, continuing our conversation about cohesion in the mind. So, there's a phenomenon in the brain called a defensive mode network, and in the whole brain, it operates like a bossy traffic cop, constantly deciding which narratives from the past to reference. And this bossy aspect is part of our small mind or ego based mind, very much the small self with a small s as compared to the higher self with a capital S. And as I mentioned in the last video, its prime directive is safety, and she's constantly interpreting what's happening by asking, "What does this mean about me? What does this mean to me?" And then that part of our brain writes and enforces our destructive narratives and tends toward excessive rigidity regarding those damaging stories that we tell ourselves. Now, the emphasis I was trying to place on excessive rigidity because that excessive rigidity can play out in any number of ways. It can actually, let me just find my list here. Where'd it go? Oh yeah, on a spectrum. So on a spectrum of rigidity, right? So from really, really intense rigidity to less intense rigidity, we experience states like anxiety or depression or addiction, and those, addiction, a high level of addiction, a high level of depression, a high level of anxiety indicate greater rigidity, while modest or mild represent less rigidity. The point is, as human beings, we all find ourselves somewhere on that spectrum of rigidity. So the goal or the objective is to soften that rigidity, to sort of the defensive mode network is like a wall between our left and our right sides of our brain. I have a graphic in the chapter that kind of helps with a visual, and the idea is to soften that wall, that defensive network, and in order for there to be communication between the right and the left sides of our brain. And there are ways to do that. Meditation is one of them, creativity is one of them, and we'll be talking about that further as in our time together in these videos. But what I want to have you know in this video, before we sign off, is here's how to recognize if the bossy traffic cop is at the helm, if that part of you is driving the bus, because really we want the part that is connected to our heart to be driving the bus, because that's where healing happens, and that's where the most unfolding of a joyful life that we all seek is more bound to happen. It's probably less likely to happen with the bossy traffic cop at the helm, because really that part of us is just operating on old narratives, and because of that rigidity, we don't have any wiggle room, if you know what I mean. So ways to recognize if that part of your brain is sort of hijacking your life is that this part of our brain operates in a state of separation from source, constantly attempting to control and prove itself. The small mind feels like because it's separated from source, then it has to prove itself against source, if you will. And that involves proving that we're worthy, proving that we're enough, always feeling that we're not enough or unworthy, and that is big for most human beings, always looking for ways that we're okay. And it's literally I see it as the primary human wound, is this idea that we're separate from source, because when we operate from that perspective, then we're really operating at a great disadvantage, high levels of rigidity, and mainly from past narratives. This part of our mind is mostly fear-based, worries a lot, creates protective mechanisms of safety, likes to be in control, lives from that destructive narrative and false belief that they are imperfect, unworthy, and that their divinity has failed them. And therefore, there's a high level in some cases of skepticism that it doesn't fully trust that love is really the order of the universe. And this part of our mind tends to be quite serious about these points that I just brought forward, very serious about it. And truthfully, spirit or source isn't as serious as we think it is. That's mainly our mind. This part of our mind does not want to change anything. It's hypercritical and judgmental of self and others, and often feels like a fraud. There's a lot more on the list, and so I just wanted to throw out a few because there's a lot to say about this part of who we are as a human being. But the key is that if we feel shackled by this part of ourselves, I want you to know that it's not all of you. While it feels like it might be all of you, it is not. And doing the work that I describe in the book, and lead you through step by step, is what helps to soften and actually give you the keys so you can get out of the feeling of being shackled by this way of being. So I hope this video made sense. It's kind of heady, no pun intended, material to be discussing in a short video, but you can always go read the chapter. It's chapter 7 in the book, and get a much better kind of overview, visual and general grasp on what this cohesion in the mind concept is, what I'm trying to put forward. So yeah, until then, I will see you in our next video. Lori Morse.